Learn to knit with Loopy Mango. It's fun and easy. In this video, you will learn how to knit an easy cropped sweater with chunky yarn from start to finish, step by step. This is a beginner-friendly project that knits up fast because we're using chunky yarn. If you've never knitted a sweater before, this project is for you. For more tutorials, like and subscribe. Back and front panels of this sweater are knit flat, bottom up. Then sleeves and neckline are added by knitting in the round. Download pattern on loopymango.com. In this video, we will be making size small. Let's get started. Materials needed for easy cropped sweater. We will be using Merino No. 5 yarn. This is super chunky merino wool. One ball has 150 grams, 74 yards. Amount of yarn depends on the size you're making. Then we have size 17 needles, 32 inches, and we'll also need size 15 32-inch needles. These two are required. Then optionally, you can use a shorter length. Here we have the 20-inch size 17. So here you can see the difference. The shorter needle is very useful to work the sleeves and the neckline. And then some optional tools. Tapestry needle is optional, and you'll need a set of scissors. We're going to start the sweater with the back panel, and for that we will be using a size 15 needle, so the smaller needle, size 15. You can pull the yarn from the inside of the ball or from the outside. It's easier to pull it from the inside. This way your ball of yarn is going to be moving around all over the place. I like to leave a longer tail so that the tail can be used to seam the panels. We make a slip knot. And start casting on. Again, we're using the smaller needle, size 15 here. So don't try to accidentally cast on with the tail end. Make sure you have a clear separation between the working yarn and the tail end. And here we're using a very simple cast on method called backward loop. So there's different ways you can hold the yarn for this cast on. It doesn't really matter. You can use your entire hand or you can use just the fingers. So we're casting on the number of stitches specified in the pattern. And for this demonstration, we will be making size small. Once you're done casting on, make sure to count the stitches. First 6 rows are going to be worked in rib, a 1 by 1 rib. So 1 knit, 1 purl. Insert the needle, yarn over, knit, put the yarn in front, insert the needle, yarn over, and purl. And we're going to repeat this until the end of the row. So 1 knit, 1 purl, repeat. So we have 2 stitches remain, a purl, and a knit. Since we cast on odd number of stitches, your first row should end on a knit stitch. So count the stitches to make sure you haven't accidentally dropped a stitch or grew a stitch. And then we flip and we start working on row number 2. For our even numbered rows, we're going to be starting with a purl stitch. So when we're working a 1 by 1 rib, we knit the knits and we purl the purls. This is what creates a rib stitch pattern. And you keep alternating the knit and purl stitches to the end of the row. So we have now worked the first 6 rows in rib stitch. And make sure your tail end is on the left side of your knitting and your working yarn is on the right side. And let's count. So you can count these bumps on the side. So each bump will stand for 2 rows. So 2, 4, and 6. So we have knitted 6 rows. There's different ways to count rows. Here's another way. You can also count those horizontal bars. Let's start at the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we have the cast on and we don't count the cast on. We're now done using size 15 needles and we'll be switching to a size 17, bigger size. So the rest of the back panel of this sweater, and the same applies to the front panel, is going to be worked using size 17 needles. And we're going to transfer the stitches as we are knitting. Insert the needle, yarn over, and so on. So we will be alternating knit rows and purl rows to create stockinette stitch. Right now we are at row 7, which is an odd numbered row, and odd numbered rows are knit rows. So you see we have size 15 smaller needles with the on the left and size 17 needle on the right. And when we're done knitting row 7, we will have transferred all of our stitches to the bigger needle. So we can put size 15 needles aside. We don't need them for now. So size 17. Next row is going to be a purl row. Insert the needle as if to purl. So as if to purl. And we're going to purl that entire row. So we're at the end of row 8 now, the purl row. And this is what we have so far. So we went from rib to stockinette. And you can see this is the wrong side of the garment with the purls and the right side with the knits. And we're going to repeat these two rows, the knit rows and the purl rows. And so this is what it looks like as we keep going. And we've knitted 20 rows. So now we're going to start doing a bit of shaping, but first let's count. So again, we're counting the bumps along the edge. This is the quicker way to count. So every bump stands for 2 rows, and here we have 20 rows. So now we will start shaping the armhole. We knit a stitch and then we decrease using SSK, slip, slip, knit, slip, slip, and then you transfer the stitches back onto the left needle and you knit those stitches together like so. So we did a left leaning decrease, and now we knit the rest of the stitches in this row until we have 3 stitches remaining. And we are going to do another decrease at the end, leaning to the right. So we're using a different decrease method, which is called K2 together, knit 2 together, and we knit the remaining stitch. And next row is a purl row, and there's no decreases in the purl rows. So purl row, we just purl all stitches. Okay, and you can clearly see that decrease on the right side and the left side of the panel. And we will now be repeating these 2 rows until we get to row 28. So through row 28, we will have a decrease using SSK at the beginning of the row. This is a left leaning decrease. We knit remaining stitches until we have only 3 stitches remain. And when we get there, we do a right leaning decrease using knit 2 together, and then we knit the remaining stitch. And make sure to count your stitches whenever you do a decrease. It really helps to count to make sure that you did do a decrease on both sides. And the purl rows have no decreases. So you can clearly see the decrease on the right side and the left side of the panel. Okay, so we have finished knitting 28 rows. At this point, we are going to just start doing a knit and purl rows. So there will be no more decreases for now. So row 29 is just a knit row. And you just keep going. And row 30 is a purl row. Again, just a plain purl row with no decreases. And just keep going with purls to the end of the row. Just keep going. And then you just repeat the knit and purl rows until you're done with the back panel. So through row 42. And this is our back panel finished. And we can now cast off. Before you cast off, it helps to just count to make sure you have the right number of rows. And now we are casting off. We will be casting off in pattern, meaning if this was supposed to be a knit row, we're going to do knit stitches. So you knit 2 stitches and you cast off 1. Then you knit 1, you have 2 stitches again, you pull the yarn over and cast off. And you repeat this process, so you always want to have 2 stitches on the right needle. So 2 stitches, and you can either use your finger or you can use the needle, whichever way you find more comfortable for you. So cast off. And then keep checking your cast off edge. Make sure it's not too tight, not too loose, and you can adjust as you're going. It helps to keep your tension a little bit more loose from your regular knitting. So just go a little bit more loose. We're at the end of the cast off row, just a couple more stitches remaining. And we are done. So back panel is done. I like to leave again a little bit longer tail. This way you can use it to seam the shoulders. And then we need to secure, so pull the yarn through that last stitch and we are finished with the back panel. And this is what the back panel looks like on the wrong side. The right side, and the shaping for the armholes. Front panel starts out the same way as the back panel. In fact, first 34 rows are identical to the back panel. And we will be using size 15 needles for the rib. It's easier to pull it from the inside. This way your ball of yarn is going to be moving around all over the place. I like to leave a longer tail so that the tail can be used to seam the panels. We make a slip knot. And start casting on. Again, we're using the smaller needle, size 15 here. So don't try to accidentally cast on with the tail end. Make sure you have a clear separation between the working yarn and the tail end. And here we're using a very simple cast on method called backward loop. So there's different ways you can hold the yarn for this cast on. It doesn't really matter. You can use your entire hand or you can use just the fingers. So we're casting on the number of stitches specified in the pattern. Once you're done casting on, make sure to count the stitches. First 6 rows are going to be worked in rib, a 1 by 1 rib. So 1 knit, 1 purl. Insert the needle, yarn over, knit, put the yarn in front, insert the needle, yarn over, and purl. And we're going to repeat this until the end of the row. So 1 knit, 1 purl, repeat. So we have 2 stitches remain, a purl, and a knit. Since we cast on odd number of stitches, your first row should end on a knit stitch. So count the stitches to make sure you haven't accidentally dropped a stitch or grew a stitch. And then we flip and we start working on row number 2. For our even numbered rows, we're going to be starting with a purl stitch. So when we're working a 1 by 1 rib, we knit the knits and we purl the purls. This is what creates a rib stitch pattern. And you keep alternating the knit and purl stitches to the end of the row. So we have now worked the first 6 rows in rib stitch. And make sure your tail end is on the left side of your knitting and your working yarn is on the right side. We're now done using size 15 needles and we'll be switching to a size 17, bigger size. Insert the needle, yarn over, and so on. So we will be alternating knit rows and purl rows to create stockinette stitch. Right now we are at row 7, which is an odd numbered row, and odd numbered rows are knit rows. So you see we have size 15 smaller needles with the on the left and size 17 needle on the right. And when we're done knitting row 7, we will have transferred all of our stitches to the bigger needle. So we can put size 15 needles aside. We don't need them for now. So size 17. Next row is going to be a purl row. Insert the needle as if to purl. So as if to purl. And we're going to purl that entire row. At the end of row 8 now, the purl row. And we're going to repeat these 2 rows, the knit rows and the purl rows. And so this is what it looks like as we keep going. And we've knitted 20 rows. So now we're going to start doing a bit of shaping, but first let's count. So again, we're counting the bumps along the edge. This is the quicker way to count. So every bump stands for 2 rows, and here we have 20 rows. So now we will start shaping the armhole. We knit a stitch and then we decrease using SSK, slip, slip, knit, slip, slip, and then you transfer the stitches back onto the left needle and you knit those stitches together like so. So we did a left leaning decrease, and now we knit the rest of the stitches in this row until we have 3 stitches remaining. And we are going to do another decrease at the end, leaning to the right. So we're using a different decrease method, which is called K2 together, knit 2 together, and we knit the remaining stitch. And next row is a purl row, and there's no decreases in the purl rows. So purl row, we just purl all stitches. Okay, and you can clearly see that decrease on the right side and the left side of the panel. And we will now be repeating these 2 rows until we get to row 28. So through row 28 we will have a decrease using SSK at the beginning of the row. This is a left leaning decrease. We knit remaining stitches until we have only 3 stitches remain, and when we get there we do a right leaning decrease using knit 2 together, and then we knit the remaining stitch. And make sure to count your stitches whenever you do a decrease. It really helps to count to make sure that you did do a decrease on both sides. And the purl rows have no decreases. Okay, so we have finished knitting 28 rows. At this point, we are going to just start doing a knit and purl rows, so there will be no more decreases for now. So row 29 is just a knit row. You just keep going. And row 30 is a purl row. Again, just a plain purl row with no decreases. And just keep going with purls to the end of the row. So we have finished working the first 34 rows of the front panel. Now we need a piece of yarn to use as a marker, because we will be working with just the first 9 stitches. So we count 9 stitches and we put a marker, and we're just using a piece of yarn, piece of waste yarn here. And we're working the left front section. So we're going to knit until the last 3 stitches of the section that we have marked. So we're basically knitting 6 stitches, then we have 3 stitches remaining before the marker, and here we're going to stop and we're going to work a decrease. K2 together. So, and then we finish knitting that one remaining stitch before the marker, and we're going to stop. That's why we have that marker in there. And we're working with those same stitches. Since we did a decrease, we now have 8, and we're going to purl those. So purl, and what we're doing here is shaping the neck. So here we're going to repeat the last 2 rows. So we're now working with 8 stitches. So we're going to knit until 3 stitches before the marker. So just keep knitting until 3 stitches remain. So 3 stitches remain. We're doing a decrease using knit 2 together. Decrease, knit, count the stitches, make sure that you did do a decrease. So we're down to 7 now, and we purl the next row. So we did decreases twice, and now there's no more decreases for this section, but see, you can clearly see the shaping of the neck taking place, and the remaining rows for left front are just going to be knit rows and purl rows. There's no more decreases for this section for left front, so we're just repeating the knit rows and the purl rows until we're ready to cast off this section. So once you've knitted a total of 42 rows, we are going to cast off. And we're now ready to cast off. We're casting off the same way we did for the back panel. So knit 2 stitches, cast off, knit 1, cast off, and so on. And just keep an eye on your tension and to make sure that your cast off edge looks nice and even. So we're done. We can cut the yarn. I'm leaving a little bit longer tail end in case I may need to use it later on. So we finished left front and we're now ready to do right front. And this is what our front panel looks like so far. So this is the wrong side of the garment and this is the right side. We're going to move some stitches to a stitch holder, and we will be using just a piece of yarn for that purpose. So count down the number of stitches specified in your pattern and move them to a stitch holder, like so, just one by one. Carefully so that you don't lose any of those. Just go slow. And keep counting. And secure those stitches so that they don't get lost. And now we are going to do right front, the neck shaping. So basically a mirror image of the left front. We're going to connect the working yarn just on the back of the panel, on the wrong side of the panel. Yarn is reattached and we're ready to proceed. So we knit one, and then we have decrease. So we were doing knit two together on the left front. Here we're going to do the opposite. We're going to do SSK. So slip, slip, knit, because we need to have a mirror image. And then we knit the rest of the stitches on the needle. And now we count to make sure that we did decrease by one. And we're going to purl the next row. So we are doing another decrease using SSK. So knit one, SSK, decrease, knit the rest of the stitches in this row, count to make sure, and we're doing a purl row without any decreases. So we have decreased twice, and now we are going to do some knit and purl rows without any decreases until we get to a total of 42 rows. So we're going to do a knit row and a purl row, and then another knit row and a purl row, and we'll be ready to cast off. And we cast off exactly the same way as we've been doing for this project. So knit 2 stitches, cast off, knit, cast off, and so on. And we're now finished with the front panel. And this is what it looks like on the right side and the wrong side. And we can now seam the back and the front panels together. This is the back panel. So let's arrange them so the wrong sides of each panel are facing each other and the right sides of each panel are on the outside. We're going to seam the sides and the shoulders. And this is where that long tail end comes in handy. Just for this demonstration, I'm going to use a contrasting color yarn so you can see better how the stitches work. So this is just purely for this video. When you're making the sweater, you will be using the tail end in the same color. So let's join the panels first. So they're now connected and we can start seaming. You can use a tapestry needle if you'd like, but it's really not necessary because the yarn is so chunky. So you see those bumps that we used to count the rows? We're going to pull the yarn in between those bumps. So let's find the first one. And you go in and out around that bump. You see how we're doing it on the opposite of the panel from where the yarn is coming from. And you're just going to alternate. So in, out, pull the yarn, make it nice and even. And then we're going to the opposite panel. And see, you're going to go in into the same opening where the yarn is coming from. You see that white yarn? So you're going to go into the same opening, in and out. Like so. Okay. And then same thing on the opposite panel. In and out. In and out. And this is what it looks like on the inside. See, on the outside, even though the color of yarn we're using for seaming is a different color, you actually don't even see it. Then here we're going a little bit quicker. So we're pulling the yarn after we go in and out twice. So one on each panel, in, out, in, out. And then now we're adjusting the yarn. And repeat. And then you repeat until you go all the way up where the armhole shaping begins. In, out, in, out, adjust. And keep checking on the inside too to make sure you don't have any like extra yarn hanging anywhere. In, out, in, out. So everything looks nice and neat on the inside and the outside. We have just a couple more to go. And we're almost done. Okay, so we're done seaming one side of the sweater. And we're now going to pick up stitches for the sleeve. We reattach the yarn on the wrong side of the garment. So just simply tie it, and then we can clean up later when we do weaving in at the end of the project. And we're going to pick up stitches. It helps to use a size 17 needle with a shorter cable. This way you don't have to use a magic loop technique. If you only have the longer cable, you will have to use a magic loop because you just won't have that many stitches to go around. But it's really helpful to have a shorter needle, so the 28-inch size 17 needle is what we're using here. So insert the needle, yarn over, and this is how you pick up a stitch. In, yarn over, pick up. In, yarn over, pick up. So you can either insert through those bumps or you can insert through the strand in between. You just need to have those stitches somewhat evenly spaced out. So depending on what size you're making, you just want to count and have them just evenly distributed. And you're going to pick up same number of stitches on each panel. So the number of stitches you pick up from the front panel should be the same as the number of stitches you pick up on the back panel. And you keep going. We keep going, picking up and counting. We're almost there. And last one. Then count. And we're going to pick up same number of stitches off of the back panel. It's just here we're going from the top of the panel down toward the armhole. So insert the needle, adjust the yarn if necessary, yarn over, and so we picked up that first stitch off of the back panel. And just keep going. So we're really doing same thing as we did for the front panel. We're just going in a different direction, but we're picking up same number of stitches. And then we'll be knitting the sleeve in the round. So we use circular needles to knit the front and the back panels of the sweater, but if you want, you can use straight needles. For the sleeve, however, because the sleeves are knitted in the round, you should be using a circular needle. But this way, your sleeves are completely seamless and there's no need to seam them. You don't have a seam. They look very nice and clean. And we're not knitting the sleeves separately. This way, the way that they're attached to the garment, to the panels, is more secure and it looks nicer too. So we're almost finished. And now we are ready to knit that sleeve. And we'll just be going in the round. So essentially, if you've ever knitted a hat using circular needles, it's like making a hat. We're going to make a little stitch marker here just for the piece of yarn. This way you will know when your rounds start and end. So place the stitch marker and we start with round 1. And the beauty of using circular needles for the sleeve is that if you're doing a stockinette stitch, you don't have to do knit rows and purl rows. You're just gonna be doing all knit rounds, and so they're not really rows. When you're working in the round, your rows are called rounds, but there's no purl rounds. You just keep repeating a knit round and it's going to give you a stockinette stitch. So keep going. We're almost done with the first round. And when you get to that stitch marker, all you do, you just place it on the right needle and you keep going. And then you keep going with the knit stitch multiple rounds. And then this is how you count these rounds. See these horizontal bars? One bar stands for one round. And then we'll have some gradual decreases before we get to the cuff. Size small and extra small, it will just be one decrease. So we've knitted 30 rounds here. So count those horizontal bars all the way up. See 1, 2, and so on. Make sure you have 30, which will mean you have knitted 30 rounds. And in round 31, we're going to have a decrease. And this is just for the first two sizes, extra small and small. For other sizes, refer to your pattern. Knit 2 together, so insert the needle through 2 stitches, knit 2 together, and then just a knit stitch until you have only 2 stitches remaining in this round. So see, we're 2 stitches away from the stitch marker and we have another decrease. So knit 2 together and we have decreased by 2 stitches in this round. So for other sizes, refer to your pattern. You will have more than one decrease round. But for this size, there's just one. And the rest of the rounds from here on until we get to the cuff are just going to be knit rounds. There's no more decreases, so you just knit and keep going. So see, we have that one decrease and the rest is just all knit rounds. Now we're going to work the cuff. So round 49, we're going to knit 2 stitches together and we will keep repeating knit 2 together for the rest of this round. So knit 2 together and just keep going to the end of the round. So last 2 stitches, again same like the rest of the round, knit 2 together. So you should reduce the number of your total stitches in half. And now we're ready to do the actual cuff. and it will be a 1 by 1 rib pattern. So knit 1, purl 1. Knit, and purl, and repeat. Knit, purl. So quite easy. The only tricky part here is because our circumference here is so small, um, it can get a little bit uncomfortable to knit. So what you do, you just pull that extra cable out. You can do it just on one side or both sides, like so. So the same way I'm doing in this video, or you can use like a traditional magic loop method. Here it's not exactly a traditional way. What I'm doing here, I'm just pulling the cable out as I'm going around, just whichever way is more comfortable for you. The only other option here would be to use double pointed needles, but I think it's just easier to use circulars. So just keep going around with this pattern, 1 knit, 1 purl, and keep readjusting that cable. And we're almost at the end of the round. And really all rounds in the cuff are going to be the same. We will be working that same 1 by 1 rib pattern. So 1 knit, 1 purl. We also have a separate video on magic loop. You might find it easier using the knitting needles for the longer cable. I don't think it makes such a big difference. Um, it will be somewhat uncomfortable no matter what needle you use, but it's just a few rounds. So when you get to the end, move the stitch marker and keep going. And like this is what the cuff will start to look like. So rearrange the stitch marker and rearrange your needles and keep going with the 1 by 1 rib. So you can kind of see the beginning of the rib pattern already. So 1 knit, 1 purl, and so on. And then just keep going around, readjusting that cable as necessary. So you see, it's okay for it to stick out like this. Because it's just too long anyway, so you can just pull it out either on one side like this or on both sides. And you're just kind of doing it in sections. So you do a few stitches, then you rearrange, then you do a few more and rearrange. Just make sure your yarn is in the right place. When you're doing the purl stitch, the yarn is in front, and when you're doing the knit stitch, the yarn is in the back. And that's all there is to it. So just keep going all the way around until we're ready to cast off. Okay, and the cuff is done. We can now cast off. So we'll be casting off in pattern. Here we were doing a 1 by 1 rib, and this is how we're going to begin. So 1 knit, 1 purl, and cast off. We don't need that stitch marker anymore, so you can take it out if you want. So we continue to add a stitch. That's a knit stitch, cast off. Next one is going to be a purl, purl, cast off. Next one is a knit, knit, cast off, and continue until we get to the end of the round. And we're almost at the end here. So just a couple more stitches remain. Last one, cast off. So here you see how we have that strange gap. It happens always when you're casting off in the round. So we want to have a clean edge. So we're going to knit one more. So we're going to knit one more stitch, insert the needle, yarn over, pick up, and now cast off. So here we now have a very nice and neat edge. And I do this not just for sleeves, but also for hats and projects like that. We're ready to cut the yarn. You don't need to leave the tail very long, just maybe a couple inches. And we'll do all the weaving in at the end. So the sleeve is done. And we repeat for the second sleeve. Now both sleeves are done. All we have left is the neckline and the shoulder seaming. So let's seam the shoulders. Seaming shoulders is going to be a little bit different than seaming the sides, and we'll be using the extra tail that we left, or if you didn't leave the tail long enough, you just reattach the yarn. You can use a large tapestry needle or simply do it with your fingers. For demonstration purposes, needle works better. This way you will know exactly exactly how to seam it, but it's definitely not required. So first we have to join. So see how we have these kind of like V's going all the way along the edge. And we'll be using that outer stitch on every V, and we'll do the same thing on the other panel. And we just need to match them up, the back panel and the front panel. So insert the needle or just thread the yarn. Okay, so we're now going to stay on the back panel because right now the yarn is on the back panel. So we're staying on the back and going to the front like so. And now we're staying in the front panel. We're finding that next stitch on each panel. Then we're going to the back. We're staying in the back and going through the back to the front. Then we're going from the front to the back and just keep alternating. So and every time you do it, you find that next V and you put the needle through it. So we're done with one shoulder and we're going to repeat for the second one. So you can see it looks nice and clean on the outside and on the inside of the garment. So you can take the needle out and repeat for the second sleeve. And again, we're going to go from the outside of the shoulder like we did on the first shoulder and going toward the neckline. It just makes it a little bit easier. You're going always from the outside toward the neckline. And exactly same thing. Find those V's and then same thing. Match them up. Insert the needle and join. So now we're staying on the back panel. Insert through the outer V of the back and join with the outer V on the front. And repeat. And you keep repeating. Same thing as we did for the first shoulder. So you're just going toward the neckline. And so we're done with both shoulders. And we're ready to pick up stitches for the neckline. We will be using a size 17 needle. Shorter needle works better. If you don't have the shorter one, just use the magic loop method and use the longer needle. We're going to join the yarn first, so reattach the yarn. It doesn't really matter where you start picking up, anywhere is fine. We're first going to knit the stitches off of the stitch holder, the stitches we put on hold. We will work those stitches first. But again, it doesn't matter. You can do it anywhere. We're going to go in the round seamlessly, so it doesn't matter where you start going. And those stitches we're just knitting. Insert the needle, yarn over, and pull the stitch holder out. Next, insert the needle, yarn over. Basically, that stitch holder is acting as a knitting needle. If it helps you, you can transfer those stitches to a spare set of knitting needles. But since this yarn is quite thick, I find it quite easy to work just off of the piece of string. We're going to count these stitches toward the total number of stitches for the neckline. And now we just have to pick up stitches all the way around and make sure that the total number matches what's in the pattern. So before we start picking up, let's do some counting. So count how many of those V's you have along the back panel, and then do some math. So you want to subtract that number from the total number minus the stitches that you already picked up, and the remainder you want to divide it by 2 and pick up that number of stitches on each side. And it doesn't have to be perfect, as long as they're like evenly spaced out and your total number of stitches matches what's in the pattern, you should be fine. So you can either go through those bumps, or you can pick up um, also through like just that horizontal bar that connects the bumps. It's up to you. It doesn't matter that much. You just want to make sure everything is more or less evenly spaced out, because you don't want to have any gaps. But this process is very similar to what you did for picking up stitches for the sleeves. So we're done picking up from the front panel, and we have moved on to picking up stitches off of the back panel. And as you're going along, just keep counting. You can also write down how many you picked up. That's a good way to keep track. And just keep going around picking up stitches. So we're almost done picking up. So just kind of make a plan, see how many stitches you have remaining to pick up. And we just have that small section left, so make sure your working yarn is in the back of the needle, because we're picking up knitwise, not purlwise. So just count and kind of see, okay, this is where I'm going to insert the needle. And when you're done picking up, you will need to count the stitches just to make sure you have the right number. And if you're off, you may need to redo it, or if you're off just by one or two, you can take a couple stitches out or insert or pick up more if you're missing some. So we're going to use a stitch marker, and now this pattern is just a 1x1 rib, so very similar to what you did for the cuffs of the sleeves. It's going to be 1 knit, 1 purl, and repeat. If you're using the shorter size 17 needle, this works perfect. If you don't have a shorter needle and you have to use the longer cable size 17, then use the same magic loop technique that you used for the cuffs, and just keep readjusting that extra cable as you're going around the neckline. So quite an easy pattern, 1 knit, 1 purl, and just go all the way around. So we're almost at the end of that first round of the neckline. When you get to the end of the round, you move the stitch marker. So move it from left needle to the right needle. This is what the neckline looks like so far. Move the stitch marker and keep going with the same pattern, 1 knit, 1 purl. And knit as many rounds as is required for your size in the pattern. So we're done with the neckline. All we have left to do is cast off. We no longer need the stitch marker, so you can take it out. We will be casting off in pattern, so in rib pattern, 1 knit, 1 purl, exactly same way as we did for the cuffs of the sleeves. So 1 knit, 1 purl, cast off, and then continue with the rib, knit, cast off, purl, cast off, and so on, and continue casting off neckline to the end of the round. And we're done casting off. Let's clean up that gap. So we're going to knit one more stitch. Insert the needle, yarn over, cast off. And if your tail end is really long, you can cut it. You only need a few inches left, so you don't need to make it that long. And we're done. And the sweater is finished. Now we can clean up. So we're going to weave in all the ends. Let's turn the sweater inside out. Well, first, if you see any gaps in the armhole area, for example, now would be a good time to close it. So all you do, you just take the tail end of the yarn and close the gap. So you're just basically going in between the stitches and you're connecting the sides and the sleeve. There's no specific way to do it, just as long as it looks nice and clean. And same thing for the other sleeve. So now we're ready to weave in all the ends. If you have a felting needle, that definitely works great for cleanup, but it's not required. If you have a tapestry needle, it's helpful, but again, because this yarn is so thick, you don't really have to use any extra tools. But if you do have a tapestry needle, we'll do a quick demo on how to use it. So all you're doing is just kind of hiding, weaving in the yarn along the seam. Don't make it too tight. Don't pull it too tight. So you can go all the way to the end, or just, I think a few stitches is enough. And now we can secure the yarn, and you can cut it. And if you have a little bit of a small tail, you can just hide it in between the stitches along the seam. If the tail is really short, we can't use the tapestry needle, but that's okay. So just hide that little tail in between the stitches or along the seam. And then we do the same for all the tail ends that we have here. So even you can see without the tapestry needle, it's quite easy. You're just hiding that tail in between the stitches. And when all the cleanup is done, this is what the sweater looks like. Congratulations on your finished project. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and we have a lot more video tutorials for you on Loopy Mango YouTube channel.